When I was new to Yoyo, I knew of one company, One Drop. Why? Because I googled what the little symbol was next to a couple of yo-yos in Terraria, and that's how I got into Yoyo. One Drop was the company for me. OGs remember that Beyond Slow Motion Yo-Yo Wizardry video. I watched that video on repeat when I was 12. Right-clicked that bitch and played it on loop. My original grails were a Terraria and a Code 2, man. I remember getting the Rev 1 when it was new because it released in a splash that had the same colors as my favorite Pokemon, Luxray. I loved One Drop. After that, though, basically haven't even considered getting a One Drop. I got a Kamuraiju, and at first I liked it. At first, I don't own that yo-yo anymore. But genuinely, I just haven't been interested in anything One Drop has been releasing. I can stand the silly releases, but it seriously got to the point where it felt like most of One Drop's releases were just constantly catered towards a hyper-casual audience. I'm no competition main. I do Zonthals and I love zoning, but that's just because I love these sorts of tricks. But so many of the yo-yos that One Drop were releasing were just not it. I was kind of on board with the Wyvern, but it didn't feel super modern, and besides that, I honestly thought you were better off looking for One Drop's older models if you wanted a good performance option from One Drop. The Virtuoso, Vitoire, Rev 2, etc. Or worse, I thought it was just better to look at other brands, and that sucked. I loved One Drop as a kid. For years, I basically hadn't even considered them or looked at their website, and at worst, I was vocally critical about their release lineup. But that finally changed with the release of the Thruline. I'd heard whisperings about what was coming through some locals that are sponsored by One Drop, but I didn't know what was actually coming. And let me tell you, when I saw the spec sheet, I was stoked. 59mm diameter, almost 49mm width, 7075 aluminum, not sub 63 grams. One Drop went from basically saying do what you can with the Wyvern or Free Solo to straight up competing with the most modern of releases. I was stoked. I straight up camped the release page for the Thruline, and I only do that for yo-yos I'm super excited for. Yo-yos like the Hydrogen Crash, Plastic Peak, and Graviton Y. Now, I flicked out the flat bearing because I'm not playing with a yo-yo this big and wide and awesome with a flat bearing. That is straight up nerfing this yo-yo. So let's get into the design and shape of the Thruline. First things first, this thing is pretty cut and dry, man. It's simple. Nothing is happening in this hub. It's just a slope, rims, and a nipple. Nothing else. The profile is something performant. It reminded me of the Wind Boundary from C3 or the Unparalleled Elevation. It's not really as sort of dry as something shaped like the Rockstar or N12 Shark's Honor, but I'll be honest, I think One Drop could have done better with this profile. This shape is not comfortable to catch or hold. These straight rim ledge drops, with how wide and how big the yo-yo is, make it really difficult to palette for a lot of people, including me. I really think One Drop could have just stood to make the profile a bit nicer to hold in the hand. Extend the rims into the profile, make them a bit rounder, and boom, you have a comfortable yo-yo to hold. And also, make it a bit more pretty to look at by adding some other design elements. Maybe just some curves, I don't know. Like I said, I think One Drop could have done better with this profile. But I don't hate the overall design of the Thruline. I think it could definitely have just a bit more to it, but I think it's good. It looks sleek. One small thing though, mine came out of the box with these little scratches where either the anodization just didn't fill it in properly, or where it got scraped off. I didn't care. I mean, look how small and irrelevant it is. Those marks literally don't affect play, they're barely visible. But I've seen plenty of other instances where the quality control of the Thruline seemed to be just kind of off. It makes sense. One Drop made 10 colorways of this yo-yo, and if they made 25 each, that's 250 yo-yos to quality control. Grievances about the design aside, let's talk about how it plays. And this is where I need to put a big asterisk behind my words. I love the way the Thruline plays, and I am absolutely in the minority. I know plenty of people who either are completely indifferent or outright dislike the Thruline. It is what it is, but I was so floored when I saw so many people dislike it that I genuinely thought people weren't playing with the same yo-yo. So take that as a heads up. I love the way the Thruline plays. A lot of people don't. I think the Thruline is a certified banger buster. To get into it technically, it's a super capable yo-yo. For things like zoning especially, the Thruline's wide width makes it crazy. You can just go around your entire body with ease because of the Thruline. It's not anemic, nor does it lack stability, so you can hit those tricks that are really outside that front box. I don't feel held back by the Thruline in general. Its stability and power just punch it through everything I do. For Zontals as well, I can be super confident and trust that the Thruline will just blast straight through them. The night I got the Thruline in, I hit arms at the gym. My arms were completely obliterated, and I was still able to crack the fuck out of my Zontal combo. The Thruline rips at Zontals. It just has the right pacing, and it feels tuned correctly. It's tight for Zontals. For things like tech, the width is really large. It's great for catching hanging loops and swinging slacks, but for weaving between tight configurations, it does get in the way just a bit. For speed, it's fine, but that's where I need to mention the odd thing about the pacing of this yo-yo. It's not sluggish or reluctant, but it definitely doesn't move as cleanly or as smoothly as some other yo-yos I've played with. It's a bit up and down with its pacing and redirects, so it's just not quite as pleasant when it moves around. It definitely moves around quickly, but it's just not super pleasant to move around, and it has a bit forward of a rim-weighted sensation. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Chopsticks. I have baby hands, and the diameter of this yo-yo is very large. I've read that a bunch of people can't hit chopsticks on this. I have never struggled with them. Maybe I'm just super consistent with my chopsticks, or maybe some of y'all just need to get better, but I really don't struggle with chopsticks on the Thruline. Anyways, the binds on the Thruline are super consistent, tight, and nice. In general, I really enjoy the Thruline. I know people don't really like the big diameter. This thing doesn't hold very well in the hand, it has its issues, but I dig how it plays, especially in comparison to a couple other yo-yos. For comparison, I'm going to bust out the Japan Technology Jugemu, rotate it real quick, the MK1 Yoyo's Path, and the Golden Standard, the Shutter. I'll start the comparison with the Jugemu, because they're both wide red boys. So right away, the big one is that the Thruline has a naturally quicker pacing than the Jugemu. The Thruline just moves faster and more efficiently, though both of them have a similar feeling rim-weighted sluggishness. Despite this, the Thruline feels a bit more maneuverable than the Jugemu. In practice, this means I move through my tricks a bit more quickly with the Thruline than the Jugemu, and I find the Thruline to be better for rail combos than the Jugemu. The Thruline also has a slightly more forward presence on the string than the Jugemu, but the Jugemu has a slight edge over the Thruline when it comes to overall stability. It's not a major one. It's really minor, but I find the Jugemu to be a bit more consistent and forgiving when it comes to withstanding string bumps. I think it's these profile edges. There's something for the string to bump into on the Thruline and throw it off plane, while the Jugemu is just a slope, especially because they're both similarly powerful yo-yos. For Zontals, I find the Thruline to be just slightly more consistent and forgiving, probably because its pacing and maneuverability feel more natural for Zontals, but generally, I'd say they exist in very similar performance tiers because they're both handily powerful, stable, and capable of basically everything. It's basically a choice of whether you'd prefer something a bit more reined in and slowed down with the Jugemu, or something a bit quicker and maneuverable with the Thruline. I do prefer the speed and maneuverability of the Thruline, but they're both sort of interchangeable for me. Next up, the Path. Like I said, basically on repeat in the Path video, the Path is more comfortably maneuverable than the Thruline. It's the Path's thing. It moves really nicely. But similarly to how the Thruline compares to the Jugemu, the Thruline has a faster pacing than the Path. In general, it's just kinda got some more compared to the Path. The power, stability, and overall speed are kinda just more. I find with the Thruline that it's more reliable for longer combos, hitting bangers, and Zontals. It's a bit more capable for things like zoning as well. But this essence of more also applies to the rim-weighted sluggishness of the Thruline. The Path is a bit more comfortable and cozy to use than the Thruline, but the Thruline packs more of a punch. But I find myself preferring the overall more performant aspects of the Thruline to the path comfortability. Finally, the shutter. So, the shutter compared to the Thruline. They have similar presence, especially with how heavy they both feel, and that's about it. For most things, the Thruline really just trumps the shutter. The Thruline is just more capable in general because it's a more modern design. The shape, width, weight distribution is just kind of fresher, so it's more capable for a modern trick set. Zoning, zonthals, hitting bangers are all just kind of easier on the Thruline because it's more capable. The Thruline is also a bit more maneuverable, so in general, I prefer the Thruline over the shutter. In general, I really like the Thruline. I was gonna place it in S tier on my tier list until I saw it was incredibly not popular with other people. Yeah, I love this yo-yo, but other people? No, not so much. Other people really do not like it. And for that reason, I feel like I have to put a big ol' disclaimer over this video. You might not like the Thruline. I dig it. I think it's awesome and I think it's great. But it's not impossible for me to be in a minority sometimes. So if you're gonna try out or cop the Thruline, just know, you may not like it that much. It's big, the shape is awkward, and some people think it needs to be a more powerful yo-yo, but it is what it is. I hope you all enjoyed the video. It's funny that One Drop made a joke performance yo-yo, and it's probably their best performing yo-yo they've released, period. Stay healthy. Adios.